Hey everybody, welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer. Happy Friday. So many of you were with us here on ABC News last night for the ABC News Democratic debate, the third primary debate from Houston, Texas. Millions of you tuned in. The numbers are still coming in. We were glad you were with us. It was a major moment in this campaign. Just 10 candidates on that stage last night. The contrast now among the candidates on the issues of health care, gun control, immigration, trade now in starker and clearer relief than before the debate. But now, where do we go from here? Who were the winners or losers last night? How do voters feel about the performance of the candidates? And is the field effectively now down to 10? For more on this, I want to bring in Nathaniel Rakich from 538, our friends over there. Nathaniel, we talked to you yesterday. Great to see you. You guys have done some instant polling on this, a before and after of sorts. So give us your bottom line. Who won last night?
Yeah, so we conducted a poll with Ipsos of the same people both before and after the debate, and those respondents said basically that Elizabeth Warren had the best debate performance. They gave her the highest marks, and also she was the only one of the four major candidates who more people said that they were considering voting for. People like Biden, Sanders, and Harris all got fewer people saying they were considering voting for them.
And if there was a loser last night, Nathaniel, it does seem, at least from the people you guys surveyed, that Castro was the one who had sort of the weakest performance last night.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Castro had the most controversial, or one of the most controversial moments of the debate, when he seemed to allude to former Vice President Biden's age. And the respondents to our poll did indeed give him the worst ranking of any of the 10 candidates for the quality of the debate. And also his net favorability rating, which is the share of people who like him minus the share of people who dislike him, fell by 7 points, which is not very good when it's just among members of your own party.
Yeah, and just to zoom out for a second, too, studying the numbers closely again, you just put up your results on 538.com. It did also strike me, Nathaniel, that basically the whole field of 10 did pretty well. We're talking about some nuances in the numbers here when ranking these, but many, if not most of the candidates had solid performances last night, according to our viewers that participated.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you saw that because it was a very substantive debate, and you saw some of the maybe more minor candidates do pretty well. So, for example, people like Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke both had people, a significant number of people, more people started to consider them. Their favorability ratings increased. In fact, O'Rourke in particular, among the subset of our respondents who actually watched the debate live, his favorability ratings really went up. So I think he had some strong moments on, for example, gun control and also on race.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Nathaniel, because you did zero in on this question of electability, which so many voters tuning in last night are sort of plugged into. Who has the best chance of beating Donald Trump? And I was struck by, again, in this instant poll from 538 and Ipsos, it looked like the perception of Joe Biden as the most electable candidate slipped a little bit. Elizabeth Warren sort of gaining on him on that front.
Yeah, I think, slipped is the right word to use. I think for the most part, we didn't see a huge change in those electability perceptions. Maybe the field kind of leveled out a little bit. So you did see the quote unquote most electable candidate previous to the debate. He was seen as a little bit less electable. Some of the more minor candidates like Amy Klobuchar or even Andrew Yang were seen as more electable. So maybe, Biden's advantage in that arena is fading. And Warren in particular, I think if she begins to be seen as more electable, that could make her really dangerous to him, but we'll see.
All right, smart analysis up right now at 538.com. Nathaniel Rakich, thanks so much. Have a great weekend, Nathaniel. Let's get some reaction now from some students on campus at Texas Southern University, a terrific host for this debate. Joining me now, Alexandria Barnabe and also Nahab Fanabula, who are both debate students there, and I met them, had the honor of meeting them on campus. Guys, it's great to see you. So let's set aside the politics for a second. Start with you, Alexandria. Because you're a pretty good student in debate, from everything I heard from your coaches. Who do you think was the best debater on that stage last night?
So as far as debate goes, there was a lot of in the debate circuit. We have this thing where we have to ask ourselves, what are we really debating? And whenever we get a resolution, so when the questions are posed, I feel like a lot of the candidates weren't really able to answer it head on, or they would kind of change the question in order to manipulate it and to give it to an answer that they want to answer. So it's a smart tactic, but I know as far as my generation goes, we're looking for real, direct, concrete answers. And I think that who done a really good job at highlighting those issues were Warren and Beto. They really were able to give more direct answers than the rest.
Let me ask you about that a little bit further, because there was a lot of chatter on Twitter and social media about Elizabeth Warren and her response to Joe Biden's question about health care. She, of course, is a big proponent of Medicare for all and has been pushed to explain how she would pay for that and whether that would include a tax, raising taxes on the middle class. Were you satisfied with her answer there? Do you think she was direct in her response to that question?
And that question is specific. I would have liked a little bit more detailed. I would have liked it to be fleshed out. I understand that they only have a very limited amount of time, but I would have liked for her to spend more time, going into detail about exactly, directly answering the question: are the taxes going to be raised on the middle class? Like, how are they going to afford to pay for Medicaid for all?
Let's bring Nahab into the conversation as well. Nahab, it's great to see you. I want to ask you about one of the biggest moments of the night last night, which was when former Housing Secretary Julian Castro sort of tangled with Joe Biden. I know you caught that moment. What did you make of that when those two sort of went at it? What's the take from students on campus?
To an extent, I appreciated that Julian Castro called out Joe Biden for his shortcomings in his policies, but I don't think it was to the benefit of Julian Castro. I think it was actually to his detriment, because it came off more as negative. It came off as divisiveness in the party. Ultimately, it almost sounded as if when Julian stated that, "Are you forgetting something you said 2 minutes ago?" He was playing to the argument that we've seen socially, where people are arguing, is Joe fully there? We've seen on the campaign trail incidences where Joe Biden has failed to remember his colleague Barack Obama's name. And Julian, trying to play to that, ultimately got crowd's reaction, but it was not the reaction he was looking for, because it came in the form of boos instead of cheers.
All right, fascinating perspective, the student perspective, the debater perspective, award-winning debater perspective from Texas Southern University, Nahab Fanbula and Alexandria Barnabe. It was a pleasure meeting you both on campus this week. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us today. Have a great weekend, guys. So how did the campaigns feel about what happened last night? Well, this morning I had the chance to speak with Simone Sanders, the Biden campaign spokeswoman. She was on my flight. She said the former vice president felt great about last night. So does his campaign. But of course, the vice president is now out on the road. He's talking to students as well this morning. That's where our Molly Nagel is. She covers the Biden campaign for us. Molly, what is your sense of things there? You've covered the former vice president in now 3 debates. You've heard the spin. You cut through the spin. Do you think they feel pretty good about this one this time?
Well, Devin, the room behind me is empty, but it was just filled because Joe Biden was actually in here talking to students at Texas Southern University. I think they're coming out of this debate feeling pretty good about it. Joe Biden has really had high expectations for all 3 debates when he took that stage, and they're coming out of this with, a good feeling. I think the consensus was this was his best debate yet. It's not a perfect debate. There were still some issues with some answers he gave on race when he was pressed by our Lindsay Davis on some of those questions, and some head scratchers there too, talking about record players and having parents play music for their kids on record players. So still not a perfect debate for Joe Biden, but definitely I think the consensus coming out of this is that it was his strongest campaign debate to date.
And that clash with Julian Castro, the former housing secretary, trying to call out the former vice president for misspeaking. There was a tangle there. Obama's legacy was invoked as well. We heard from Castro here on ABC News Live last night. He said it wasn't personal. What have you heard from the Biden campaign and the former vice president? What is he having to say about that exchange?
Well, we haven't heard from the former vice president just yet about what he thinks about that exchange with Julian Castro. He's going to be gaggling with reporters any minute now. But the campaign already seems to be capitalizing it, and they are saying that it is very personal. They're calling it a low blow in an email to their listserv, they're saying that Julian Castro was the one who got the facts wrong, and it was a low blow for him to go after Joe Biden like that. So they're clearly not looking to let go of that anytime soon.
All right, he's a fighter, ready to move on. Molly Nagel is going to be with him now. The front runner headed out on the campaign trail this weekend. Molly, thank you so much for that reporting. Our team covering the other front runners, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, tracking those candidates this morning and their reaction to last night's ABC debate as well. They are traveling right now, but moments ago filed these dispatches.
Last night was really a big night for all of the top-tier candidates who got a sense for what it's like to be on stage together for the very first time. It was all of our first time watching them, too. Senator Elizabeth Warren, those I talked to from her staff, say they feel good about how she did on that stage last night. And now we're right on to the next stop. We're headed to Massachusetts. Warren will be speaking there for a homecoming of sorts at the Massachusetts Democratic Convention. I'm making my way there now, slowly but surely, from the Houston airport. And then the big moment will come on Monday when she's taking over Washington Square Park. She's going to be delivering a really big speech there, a moment perhaps of reset of sorts as we head into the fall already of this election cycle.
Senator Bernie Sanders is hitting the ground running in the early state of Nevada just a day after leaving that debate stage. Now, in the nearly 14 minutes that he spoke on stage last night, you probably heard that his voice was a little hoarse, but we're told that that's not going to affect him keeping up with his demanding campaign schedule, which is filled with town halls and rallies on college campuses. I was speaking with campaign officials, and I'm told that they are expecting and getting ready to roll out lots more policy proposals, progressive policy, including one that promises to eliminate all medical debt. I think as those primaries inch closer, we can expect to see Senator Sanders do more of what he did from the debate stage last night, which is criticize Joe Biden and put forth progressive policy. Devin?
All right, thanks to Avery Harper and Cheyenne Hazlitt for that report. 14 million people tuned in last night across ABC and Univision. The company just announced, well, was President Trump among them? We don't know for sure. He's been silent on Twitter so far. Surprising silence, perhaps, but there's been no shortage of commentary from his campaign. A short time ago, they put out a statement from campaign spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany saying this about last night's debate. President Trump's record of accomplishment easily eclipses any of these weak candidates. And we've just learned that his campaign is now gearing up to rapidly intensify his presence out on the campaign trail headed into the fall. We're told that we should expect a rally from President Trump now about once a week or once every 10 days going forward. So a much quicker pace from the president as this heats up. Our Kira Phillips is our White House correspondent. She's over there right now. Kira, you've been tracking the president as he responds to this debate. Still silence on Twitter, but he was up in Baltimore last night. What did he have to say up there?
Well, he was, but can I just back up for a second, Devin, and let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Have you ever known President Trump to go this long without tweeting, especially after a debate?
This probably is a first. Have you run the clock on this one? How long is this?
Okay, I didn't run the clock, but I can tell you just sitting back there in the booth for this long period of time and watching his Twitter and seeing nothing.
How's the silence? Are you liking the silence?
Well, I don't know. It's making me a little uncomfortable because I thought for sure after the debate and some of the comments that were made about him, like Amy Klobuchar, you remember she said, Houston, we have a problem. And then there was the remark from Kamala Harris calling him the little dude behind the curtain, referring to the Wizard of Oz. And I thought for sure he would be up here this morning right behind me as soon as he woke up and that he would be tweeting because, you know, it happens right over there, right over my left shoulder. But he hasn't said anything yet. He hasn't responded to any of the jabs. He hasn't responded to any of the candidates and what they had to say. But I can tell you that as of yesterday, before the debate happened, when he was out at the departure, I asked him if he was going to be watching the debate. And he said, yes, I'm going to Baltimore first, but I will watch it, as he said, on rerun. He said, but he would be paying attention to 3 people. He was very specific about that. He told me that he would be listening and paying attention to Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and also Bernie Sanders. And then I asked him if he saw, out of those 3, if he saw one in particular that was a threat. And this is what he told me.
Out of those 3, who do you think your strongest opponent is? I think, look, they all have their weaknesses and their strengths. I think that they're very different. You certainly have a lot of different voices up there, but it would look to me like it would be Elizabeth Warren, and it looks like Joe maybe will be able to get there, maybe not, I don't know. And certainly Bernie is there. He's number 3. But I think that's because they're so far in the lead, the 3 of them. And if you remember, I'm sure you forget my Republican primaries, but I went to the lead at the very beginning and stayed there. It's, if you don't make a really major mistake, he should be able to make it. I would imagine Biden would be able to make it if he doesn't make any major mistakes. We'll see what happens.
And then, Devin, you asked about the GOP event in Baltimore last night, and he did say then, you really have to elect me whether you like me or not. It makes no difference because our country will go to hell. If any of these people get it, it'll go to hell. Remember, it's Friday. It's not the end of the day.
And it's Friday the 13th, Kira. It's Friday the 13th, okay?
I knew you had to say that. Yeah, thank you.
That is noted. All right, have a great weekend.
You.
Kira Phillips at the White House eagerly awaiting a tweet from the president, who's been strangely silent in the face of this Democratic debate. But let's turn now to one of the more poignant topics in last night's debate. It was the topic of gun reform. That debate happening in Texas just over a month after 2 deadly mass shootings in that state, including one in El Paso, Texas, the hometown of former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, that claimed the lives of nearly 24 people. All Democrats on stage last night favor stricter gun controls. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas knows about that, but there are also some real differences, Pierre. Let's just listen to a little bit of that sound, and then want to get your reaction.
So we want to get something done. And I personally think we should start with a voluntary buyback program. That's what I think, David.
I met the mother of a 15-year-old girl who was shot by an AR-15, and that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour because so many other people were shot by that AR-15 in Odessa and Midland. There weren't enough ambulances to get to them in time. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
The Texan electrifying the room there was pretty incredible. This whole idea of gun buybacks has taken off in the Democratic primary. What is that exactly to people that aren't familiar? How would it work? What is a buyback program?
Well, it's essentially what it sounds like, buyback, where on weapons like assault rifles, the AR-15, which was mentioned, cities, the federal government in this case, would provide money to buy weapons from people to get them off the street, essentially. And some major cities have done it before, and
it's been tried in some places.
It's been tried in some places, and
is it successful?
It has been successful in some places. People will show up with guns that they're no longer using, guns that they're no longer uncomfortable with or comfortable with, and so it has worked. In some other countries, it's worked pretty aggressively in removing guns from the street.
I guess the question is, should it be mandatory?
Well, again, therein lies this huge debate in the country. You know, the Second Amendment, some people see it as almost a religious thing that they believe in. Other people believe that there should be many more restrictions on guns. But I think what you're seeing now, and particularly if you look at what former Congressman O'Rourke said, this ongoing, accelerating mass shooting phenomenon in public places is what is sort of changing the feeling about this issue, and that something has to be done. But I should say,
they're arrayed against a pretty stiff opposition on this idea of mandatory buybacks. In fact, just today, the Vice President Mike Pence, was up in Baltimore speaking, and he hinted how Republicans are going to address Beto O'Rourke. Let's take a listen to that.
Not just gun control. You had leading candidates for the highest office in the land talking about taking firearms away from law-abiding citizens. Well, the American people deserve to know this president, this vice president, and these House Republicans will always stand for the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms.
Predictable, I suppose, but everybody's back in their corner. They're going to take our guns.
Right. Well, you know, in some ways, the argument in this country about gun control has been sort of stale if you compare it to the problem. Again, we don't have the levels of gun violence we had at the epidemic of the crack wars back in the 80s and 90s. Overall, violence has gone down. But make no mistake, we have what I call chronic epidemic gun violence, where there are thousands of people literally shot and killed and wounded in this country every year. And you know, there's some reporting coming out of Missouri today that struck us all, just as parents and as human beings, quite frankly. 3-year-old in the last 24 or 48 hours killed himself after apparently his father may have left the weapon in the vicinity of the child.
They've had a spate of deaths of children in Missouri, middle of the country.
Right, same day, 13-year-old shot and killed walking with friends. Now, if you want to understand why some people say we've got to get beyond this stale argument of gun control or not, let me just share with you some numbers from this year about children specifically. Since the beginning of the year, according to the Gun Violence Archive, the number of children ages less than 1 year old to 11, 492 shot or killed in this country. Number of children ages 12 to 17 shot or killed, 2,167.
And this just pales in comparison.
So you see the point I'm getting at, that while people are having...
These aren't mass shootings. This isn't a big city problem. This is an everywhere problem happening daily in places like St. Louis, Missouri, middle of the country. And it's something that has sort of at least led to some action from the White House, which seemed to be preparing some package of legislation. I want to bring in our congressional and White House reporter, Catherine Faulders, because she's been on the beat this week tracking what had been, Catherine, a major moment in this conversation on guns. The president was preparing to unveil a package of legislation. Mitch McConnell said, "Sir, I am ready to take a vote on what you put on the table."
Yeah.
And where is the plan? What do we know?
Well, look, senior officials have told us for weeks that it will be as early as this week during recess, when Congress was gone for about 6 weeks. The White House was saying that they were communicating with senior staffers on the Hill to come up with some sort of legislative plan. But right now, at least according to the sources that I spoke to today about this, the president was briefed with a series of options yesterday. They wanted to perhaps say something in his speech at the GOP retreat yesterday, but he's getting lobbied by all different sides here. We know the NRA has been meeting a lot with him. We know that some Democrats are lobbying him heavily on something else. And I think, Devin, that's the main question. They say something is still in the works and that they are still having these conversations with the Hill. But the thing that I have heard the most is that he's leaning heavily towards background checks broadly. Now, what does that mean and what does that look like? Nobody I've spoken to can really say exactly what he wants to do there, but he keeps bringing it up, and that's what at least my sources are telling me that he
so we're still in the wait and see mode. Hopefully they will act soon, because Congress, the clock is ticking. The window for action this fall is diminishing, and we do know, we should say, the conversation on the campaign trail on gun buybacks, Pierre, it's not something that we've heard to be on the table in this town.
Right. I mean, and in terms of the background checks, I think the two issues that have been going back and forth in terms of the conversation that we're hearing about, at least in law enforcement circles, is, okay, can you expand the background checks to private sales from private citizens to strangers and at gun shows? And so red flag laws, where when people are identified to have, psychological or instability, if actions can be taken to temporarily take their weapons, the whole issue of due process is what people are hammering out. But again, I think it's a really seminal moment in the country, where if you look at that weekend of El Paso and Dayton and all that carnage that happened again in public places, is what's sort of changing, I think, the conversation, because as I think I said to you maybe a few weeks ago, there are now fewer and fewer places that you can say that you can go that there has not been violence in public
It's everywhere,
places.
and people are seeing that. We were in Texas. We heard it loud and clear. Even in some surprising places, people are ready for some sort of action. We'll see what can come down the pike maybe next week. Catherine Faulders, thank you. Pierre Thomas, always great to have you here. Thank you so much, sir. And as the candidates head back out on the trail this weekend, they're already turning their attention to the next debate. The Democratic National Committee has just announced now the site of the 4th Democratic presidential debate. It'll be October 15th, possibly the 16th in Westerville, Ohio. It's just outside Columbus. We will see how that comes together, potentially a second night there if more candidates make the cutoff. But as we close this week and make the turn here in the campaign toward the fall season, we wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the ABC News debate and the camaraderie that exists between the candidates on this Democratic field that isn't often caught on camera. Hope you have a great weekend and see you here on Monday.
All right, yeah, colleagues here. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, the most popular panelist from the Powerhouse panel right now.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Senator Booker, thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Mayor Pete.
Love you, too.
Come on up.
This is the other Rhodes Scholar mayor in the race.
Take in, take out. Nice job.
Thank you.
Up next, another senator, another one of your colleagues.
It was fun. You were okay.
They battle on the debate stage, and they are friends right after the debate. And friends during the debate, I should say, as well.
There
right?
we are. Thank
Good
you.
luck out there.
It was great to be on. And by the way, it was a great debate. You guys should be really happy at ABC.
We appreciate that.
Thank
we'll
you.
send that note up to the moderators.
Oh, yeah. Upstairs.
Upstairs.
See you later,
Big
Amy.
guys.
Goodbye, Heidi.
Bye.
Goodbye. Didn't you try that Fargo accent? I had the closest one up there. Okay, bye.
We got another moment going on here. We'll make sure we put that for the highlight reel.
We should have a cap on senators. That's
Actually,
all.
Matt, I was going to come to you, but somebody who's on the debate stage is going to join us now. Senator Warren, Andrew Yang, we thank you for your time. Good luck out there on the campaign trail.
ABC is the bomb. You guys are the best.